Let's see here. We'll go to Mike. Mike, you mentioned you may be having some brake issues and you've just replaced your pads and rotors. What's it doing to you?
Yeah, it's the weirdest thing. I went on YouTube and it looked like a fairly simple task to change the rotors and the pads.
Hmm.
So I thought, okay, I can do that. And so it runs fine. Driving it around the block after I did the job, everything seemed fine. It worked great. Just driving around town, it worked great. And then a few weeks later, I got out on the freeway, and I had to touch the brakes, and I had exceeded 60 miles an hour.
Hmm.
Now, I don't know why 60 would be a thing, but it seems like every time I try and brake over 60 miles an hour, I get really severe vibrations.
Hmm.
And as soon as it goes below 59, and it's back to normal. And
Hmm.
I've taken the wheel off and I've looked and I can't see any defect or any warping or, the pad's fine. Have you ever encountered anything like this before?
Well, I can tell you that what I found on most cars. Now, this is not every car because they're engineered different ways for different vehicles. But and many times, if I'm trying to make a decision on if a vibration is coming from the front or the back, and I'm doing this without putting a dial indicator on it to check the warpage of the brake rotors and all that, most of the time I have found that if I'm coming up to a stop sign and I feel a heavy pulsation as I'm coming to a stop sign, then most of the time it's the front brakes that are doing that. But if I'm riding down the road and going 50, 60 miles an hour and hold very slight brake pressure on it and feel a heavy vibration coming from the vehicle, most of the time that's the rear. So now that don't explain. Evidently, this just started doing this after you did the front brake.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. So and I mentioned different designs, different cars. What type vehicle is this?
2013 Corolla. So the braking isn't coming to a stop. It's like, if I'm going 65 down I-20 and I'm pulling off on exit 199, and so I'm just slowing down to about, 50, 45, whatever, so I can get into the off ramp.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's the moment that it vibrates so badly. Like I said, once I get below 59, then it's fine again.
Yeah, now that's the case. I found it just like that is when I found many times it's the rear, but it's not. That's not on every vehicle. It kind of depends on which one, how they got the load set up on the vehicle, how much they're putting on the front, how much stopping power they put on the front as compared to the rear. If yours just started it after you put these brake rotors on there, my guess is you've got some bad rotors. Now, that used to be very common. We used to get a set of brake rotors and pads and put them on the vehicle, and it wasn't very uncommon that they would have this vibration. So years ago, we would actually even return brand new rotors so that they would be smooth before we put them on the car. Then as time went on, they started building rotors better and better. Some people said it had to do with the way they were stacking the rotors years ago, and now they do things to make them to where they don't stack them the same way so they don't tend to warp. Others say that it had to do with the way the rotors were built, and now they're when they're building them, they're much truer than they were before. But if you didn't have the problem before and you have it now, I would recommend going back to the place where you bought the brake rotors from and say, these rotors that I purchased are out of round and need to be replaced. Now, I always recommend also, now, of course, before you do it, make sure that all your caliper bolts are good and tight. And then if you do put the new rotors on there again, double check your caliper bolts, make sure all that's good. And but really, the things that you describe with it not doing it beforehand, you had to have got a hold to some bad rotors.
Is it just bad to try and do something like this yourself? Do you save it for the experts, or or what
Well,
would you
not
recommend?
necessarily because you're not able to do it, but see, you're doing like that one brake job every couple of years, and so
Yeah.
you don't know what items happen or not. For instance, we might find that if we buy rotors from one place, that we're more prone to have problems than if we buy rotors from another place. As a matter of fact, when we buy rotors, we don't buy. A long time ago, you used to buy a set of pads, and then if it needed rotors because the old ones couldn't be turned, you would just buy the rotors separate. Now they come in a brake kit. We buy brake rotors in kits, and knowing one place you may purchase a set that you're more prone to get good ones than another, and it won't necessarily. It can vary from one time to the next. Just like at one time we used to return rotors after we bought them, and so now we know we don't have to do that because they fixed that issue. So I guess what I'm saying is more that technician would have the experience level. And of course, there are a lot of tricks to brakes, like you're supposed to put anti-seize compound on the slide pins to make sure that they don't stick at times. You're able to, but sometimes it has to do with just knowing where to purchase what parts. And if there are any other tricks along the way, sometimes in helping with squeaks, there's a washing procedure for rotors that most technicians do. So I would say it's a good idea, but if you're saving a lot of money, but I realize also sometimes people do things like that not to save money. Sometimes they do it because it's kind of like gardening. It's kind of like playing golf or something else. They do it. Sometimes people do it because they enjoy it. They want to do it and I'm good with that as long as they're safe. You want to make sure people use jack stands and don't put a jack stand in mushy areas to where it could go down. And that's the reason I love to tell people the safety along with the other. But it's just fine to do it yourself, but you may run into some issues just like you're running into now every now and then. But it sounds like you got a hold to some rotors that are not good.